According to Cal, the wet U.S. media are almost as bad. On NBC, ABC, and CBS, three main channels, he writes that in the first 2 weeks of the war, there were 133 stories of Israeli attacks against Lebanon, 89 on Hezbollah attacks against Israel, which in the real world were a virtually undetectable, minuscule fraction of the Israeli attacks, and furthermore were in retaliation for Israel's immediate and very heavy bombing of civilian areas in Lebanon after the capture of 2 Israeli soldiers. And the capture of 2 Israeli soldiers means demonstrably precisely nothing by Western standards. Easy to prove. For decades, Israel had been kidnapping, often killing, Lebanese and Palestinians in Lebanon or on the high seas in transit between Cyprus and Lebanon, sometimes holding them as hostages for many years. Hundreds were sent to secret prison torture chambers like Facility 1391, which is exposed in detail in Israel, reported in England and on the continent, but never in the U.S. No one ever called for an invasion of Israel, and if they had, it would have been described as a reversion to Nazism. Well, this is just a tiny fraction of the pure cynicism of this. Actually, there is a response to Cal's extraordinary display of apologetics for aggression and atrocities. It's by Howard Friel. He's the co-author with Richard Falk of an outstanding book. Just came out on the coverage of Israel-Palestine by the New York Times the last 6 years. This book is a follow-up to a devastating critique of New York Times coverage of a wide range of other issues. Those are 2 more books that are far too important not to review or to mention. You can search, but there were 3. Zachariah and Cobb, that device, is an interesting illustration of one of the favorite maxims of John Quincy Adams, the great grand strategist of American expansionism. One of his favorite authors was Tacitus, and his favorite maxim was Tacitus's statement, "Crime once exposed has no refuge but audacity." And it works in a deeply indoctrinated intellectual and moral culture. Well, let's turn to the next likely horror story, Iran. The world is aghast at the possibility of the U.S. or Israel attacking Iran. Iran's neighbors, Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, they don't like Iran, and they certainly don't want it to have nuclear weapons. But large majorities there prefer for Iran to have nuclear weapons rather than any military action. Well-known British military historian Corelli Barnett wrote a couple of weeks ago that if the U.S. attacks Iran, it'll be World War III. Iranians have been warned for years to take defensive action. The last couple of years, Israel has the largest and technologically most advanced air force anywhere, outside, greater than any NATO power outside the United States. But the U.S. for the last couple of years has been sending them about 100 advanced jet bombers. They very publicly announced and declared to be capable of bombing Iran and returning. That's a warning to the Iranians. Martin von Crefeld, leading Israeli military historian, wrote in the International Herald Tribune in Europe that, of course, he doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. But after the invasion of Iraq, if Iran is not developing nuclear weapons, he wrote, they're crazy. The United States informed the world that it's going to attack anyone it likes if they're defenseless. So it's an invitation to say you better build nuclear weapons. The Iranians are notified about the attack. The population here is kept in the dark. We don't know. The information has to be kept secret because of what's called security. If you haven't done it yet, I'd advise. It's instructive to read through the record of declassified documents. They're open societies in the United States, at least. So you get a lot of declassified documents. And they're interesting reading. They are kept secret for reasons of security. Security against the primary enemy, the domestic population. Overwhelmingly, they're kept. The security has to be so that the population won't know what the government's planning. I mean, there's some legitimate security, but that's the bulk of it. And this is another case. They're going to tell us what they're planning. We're not supposed to know. Maybe the attack is being planned, maybe not. Could happen by accident. The U.S. naval forces deployed in the Gulf, and it's almost like an invitation for some kind of accident. The U.S. is sponsoring terror almost certainly inside Iran. Recently it was reported from Balochistan, probably elsewhere. The likely area is Khuzestan, that's Arab area of Iran near the Gulf, which happens to be where the oil is. You can kind of guess without seeing secret documents that some of the planning in Washington is to take over Khuzestan on the pretext of defending it from Iranian aggression. Then you got the oil, and you can carpet bomb the rest of the place. It's probably one of the plans, but we don't know. Maybe World War III. Is there an alternative? Yeah, there have been Iranian initiatives. In 2003, the Iranian government, with the support of the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, approached the United States with an offer, which you can read. It was kept secret for years, but it's leaked. So you can read it on the internet now, so you know what it says. It called for negotiations on all nuclear issues, and also on a two-state settlement for the Israel-Palestine problem. And that continues. Khamenei, who's the Supreme Leader, has again reiterated that Iran accepts the Arab League position on Israel-Palestine. That's call for normalization of relations with Israel in terms of the long-standing international consensus on a two-state settlement that the U.S. has unilaterally blocked for 30 years and still does. The West loved Ahmadinejad. Every crazed statement of his is right on the front pages, often mistranslated. But they don't like his superior, Khamenei, who happens to be in charge of foreign affairs, so Ahmadinejad has nothing to do with it, and whose statements are just too moderate, so you don't read them.